Hello, everybody, and welcome to this session from Idea to Impact. CO, Jean, audio sounds great. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Thanks again, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And while I get that up, I just want to say thanks to everybody for their patience and their grace and flexibility today, as all of us panelists, as well as the CCO team, we're all dealing with this new way of doing things. So this virtual way of doing things. So I'm going to get all of my little boxes set up for Q&A and chat and everything, and then we'll rock and roll into this. So again, welcome everybody. My name is Lindi Conover. I am coming to you today from beautiful downtown Anderson, Indiana, and I hope that you will pop in the chat and tell me what your name is and where you're from. I see that we have 30 participants, which is awesome. I can't wait to tell you all about this process of going from idea to impact. So yeah, if you would, please pop in the chat, tell me who you are, where it is you're joining us from today, because I would love to know. So we've got Jonathan from Sacramento, California. Welcome. I hope you're having beautiful weather out there as well. So I want to first start by telling you that if you have ever been in a session with me, you know that I like to keep things really interactive, especially when it comes to a subject like this. We're talking about ideas and moving things into action. Jean Ann is here from Stillwell. That's awesome. Stacy Pratt from Kansas City, Missouri. Tanya in Cherokee, North Carolina. Mike Phillips in Collinsville. Thank you guys. Keep putting it in here. That is awesome. It's so good to see everybody here. Thank you so much. So I like to keep things really interactive. If we were doing this like normal person to person, we'd be up, we'd be down, we'd be talking, you'd have a workbook in front of you. Since we're doing this virtual, things are gonna work a little bit differently. I'm gonna go ahead and tell you, if you don't already have it, grab a piece of paper and a pen, because throughout the session, we're gonna have a chance to do, instead of doing a workbook, I've got some questions, but I really want you to write them down. Write down the answers to them, because I'm a firm believer that if it's not written down, it doesn't exist, at least when it comes to action plans. So that's kind of some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about today. So I want to make sure you have your pen and pencil or your pen and paper ready. So again, use the chat and the Q&A throughout this like as if we were just talking to one another, okay? Savannah and I will be here to help moderate those things. And again, thanks for your patience as we work through that. So you guys are awesome already. So we're talking today about going from idea to impact, how to take your community organization and take all the great ideas that you have and make them happen and benefit your community. So what we're really talking about here is impact, is making impacts in your community. So I am originally from Anderson, Indiana, but I moved to Tahlequah, Oklahoma back in 2011. I came there to work on a campaign, and I absolutely fell in love with the community. I decided to stay after the campaign was over, and I lived and worked in Tahlequah for about 4 years. I worked at the Cherokee Heritage Center there. Prior to working at the Cherokee Heritage Center, I did a lot of work in community organizing. So I did a lot of political campaigns. That's not what this is about. It's not about getting political. But that's what I did. I did a lot of community organizing work. So I've been doing that since, gosh, I was in high school, so over 15 years. And through the course of doing this kind of work with nonprofits and grassroots community organizations like the ones that are in this session, I've kind of developed an idea, sort of a framework for how change happens and how groups of people can strategize to impact their community in beneficial ways. And I am a strong believer that a group of people has the power to impact their corner of the world. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And this is what we can talk about after today as well, when we work together on getting your community organization in the shape that you want it to be in. So like I said, I moved to Oklahoma in 2011. I consider it my second home. In 2014, I decided I wanted to go to grad school, and I missed my family back in Indiana, so I moved home, but I built a business that allows me to be in Oklahoma part-time. So I'm there about a third of the time when we're not in the middle of a global pandemic. Unfortunately, we are in the middle of a global pandemic, which is why we're all doing this from the comforts of our living rooms or our home offices, as opposed to being all together in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. But I think this is still going to be wonderful as long as everybody's interacting. So that's awesome. We've already got some folks in here who are sharing. That's wonderful. Keep it up. That's awesome. So like I said, I spend most of my time, all of my time right now in Indiana, but when we're not in the middle of COVID, I spend about a third to half of my time in Oklahoma or traveling with CCO to some of the at-large organizations. So again, today we're going to be talking about impact and how we can take your great ideas and turn them into action. So each one of the letters in impact, how clever of me, I put together these little words or phrases that help you to understand what this process is all about. And what we're gonna do is go through each of these pillars of action. The I is for ideas and intentions, M is for making decision, P is for planning, A is for action, C is for creating change, and T is for telling everybody. So we're gonna go through each of these pieces, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about what is involved in each of the pillars, and then I'm going to ask you some questions that I want you to write down. That's why I asked you to grab your pen and paper, and I want you to put the answers down and really think about it. So what's going to happen is I'm going to tell you a little bit about what this pillar is, give you some ideas and things to think about, then we're going to pause, and this is where if we were normally together, I would have you talk with other members of your organization and fill out a workbook, but since we don't have workbooks and we're not together, that's why you're going to just fill them out on your pieces of paper. And then I will play a little bit of music. Hopefully it'll work out all right. While you guys are filling this out, we'll take just a minute or two, and then we'll move on to the next step. Then when we're done with all of the 6 different pillars, then we'll come together for some Q&A. But along the way, if you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the Q&A, which is at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you haven't found it already, there should be a little ribbon that pops up, and there's some different options, including the Q&A. So if you just click on that, you can type in your questions, and we will answer them. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and start with impact, the ideas and intention. So what happens when a community organization decides that they want to make greater impact in their community? First, what it requires is just everybody sitting down in an honest and open and respectful manner and sharing all the ideas. Hey, this is what I envision our organization to look like. Maybe the person sitting next to you envisions it to be something completely different, and that's okay. The point is, during this process of taking your idea to action, you have to have all the ideas on the table before we can decide which ones work. So the first pillar includes sharing all the ideas of all the members of the organization, putting everything on the table. One of the things that you want to accomplish during this step is understanding the purpose of the organization. And that always comes from the ideas and the feelings and the values that everybody holds inside. The other thing about defining your ideas and your intentions in this context is that we want to sincerely embrace and celebrate what it means to be Cherokee. And that's something that's really unique to this kind of organization because it's affiliated with Cherokee Nation, is that woven throughout all of the things that we do, we've got this sense of being Cherokee first. And that is something that we can hold sort of in the middle as sort of a shield, that this is the one thing that connects us all. Now, what that means or what that might look like could be very different from organization to organization, and that's fine. So these are the things that are involved with the idea and intention piece of taking your idea into action. Jan-Annette Pope asks if we can share PowerPoints later to work with us on your commute. Can you share PowerPoints with us later to work with our communities later? Yes, I'm sure there's a way that we can do this. If we don't if there's not a way that I can put these in this right now, there's certainly a way that we will be able to connect later. Okay, so thank you for asking that. In the Q&A, we'll come back to that. So what I'm going to do now is take you to the next slide, which lists all the different questions. I'm going to walk you through these questions and maybe give you some ideas to think about. And then we're going to pause for a minute, and I'm going to have you write down those ideas. And then maybe some folks can share them in the chat if you feel comfortable. If not, that's fine too. So I just want, whoops, excuse me. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to go over these questions. One of the questions that you would answer during this part of your sort of action planning process is, who makes up this community? Communities can be defined in many different ways. They can be geographical, and oftentimes in our CCO organizations, they are geographic because, hey, we're here in the Chewy community, and so we, the geographic location is something that binds us. But that's not always what makes up a community. If you think, for example, of the LGBT community, that might be some LGBTQIA community. That might be something that there are people who belong to a community that has nothing to do with geography. Like I said, a lot of ours just happen to be geographical, but they don't always have to be either. What are your values? What are some of those things that drive you personally, but you also maybe think should drive the organization? Values could be something like integrity. Obviously, what it means to be Cherokee is Cherokee values is something that would be important for this community. What does success look like for us? Now, this is an interesting question, and I always love working with organizations on this, and individuals too. Think about this question in terms of the future. Like, okay, if we are successful, this is what that would look like. So if you're thinking about success, think in 2 years, this is maybe what we would have liked to have accomplished, or this is how I would view our organization as being successful if X. So really paint that out. What does success look like for us? What experiences do we want our members to have? So this is sort of a two-part question because it's both internal and external. So what are the experiences that we want our membership to have? The people who consistently come to our meetings, or we're constantly talking to, what kind of experiences do we want them to have? Something, is our organization all about having fun? Is our organization about learning? What are those experiences we want our membership to have? But also think about what experiences you want others outside of your organization to have when they interact with you. So that's another kind of experience question to ask yourself. And then here's another question that I always think is really interesting. It kind of speaks to the need for your organization. How is the world, or our corner of the world, a better place because of the work that we do? Now, this is a really powerful question. You can think about it in a lot of different ways. So I'm gonna have you all just pause for a moment. I'm going to attempt to play some music for maybe a minute, and just have you guys write these down, and then we'll come back together and we'll move on to the next one. If anybody does feel like they want to share, go ahead and pop the answers to one or more of your questions in the chat, and we can talk about it. This is the kind of thing that if we were doing this live, I would ask somebody to break the ice, raise their hand, and actually tell me what they wrote down. So if you just want to do that in the chat, that would be awesome. I'm going to go ahead and be quiet so you can answer these questions, and I'm going to try to make some music happen for us. All right, I'm gonna have everybody come back together. Let's see, and take this back to where it was. Okay, thank you to those of you who popped some information in the chat. I do appreciate it. So I'm gonna share one of the answers that Marcia had for the group, if that's okay. Marcia, thanks so much for sharing. Marcia said that 2 years ago, a tornado came through their community, and the storm barely passed the building, barely passed the community, when they were able to open their community building for shelter and food for the folks in the neighboring community. She said that electric was out for about a week, but we were able to make sure everyone in the community had food and water for those who needed. And she says, to me, that is success. And Marsha, I couldn't agree more. This is one of the things that makes me so excited. I just explode with excitement when it comes to CCO communities, because this is what it really is all about. It's about connection and just really caring for your neighbor, no matter what circumstances are, whatever those individuals' circumstances are, you're there for them. And that's really awesome. So to me, that is also success. That doesn't, and by the way, there's no right or wrong answer to this. It's just sort of future thinking. Like, what is it going to look like for us when we are doing what we want? And for this community, that's awesome. We definitely saw that for them, success is being able to care for your neighbors. So that's awesome. I really love that. I'm going to move to the next piece of impact, which is the M. This is all about making a decision. So what we're really talking about here is sort of this broad process of going from an idea to making impact is a little bit of strategic planning and some action, and how these two things come together. So when you're at the beginning of this process and you've got all these ideas floating around on the table, and you're setting your intentions for the organization, and you're thinking about the things that you want to do, at some point you're going to have to make a decision about what it is that you really do want to do right now in the near future, and try to move that idea forward, move this very specific thing forward. And so that's what we're talking about when we're talking about making a decision. It's making a decision on one or two things, one or two projects or programs that you're going to do that's all about what your organization is for your community. So this is where you're aligning your ideas and intentions with your values. You're developing the organizational roles and structures of your community organization. So you're thinking about who is in the organization, what can they bring to the table, what can they contribute, what are their strengths, those kinds of things. You're also codifying goals. You're saying, okay, right now we've decided that for the next year, maybe these are going to be the goals that we decide that we try to accomplish and the objectives that we're working on. And then you want to determine which projects and programs to undertake and in what order. So this is all about strategic planning. It's saying, okay, this is the capacity that we have right now. We have 8 members of our organization who come every month, and we carry the load, and we know that we can't take on the whole world, but this is a project that we can take on. And we also believe that if we do this project right and we do it well, that it'll encourage others in the community to join us for our next project. So that's where you're understanding your leverage. Okay, so again, you're just sort of deciding which projects or which ideas to implement right now. And then later, once you finish this whole impact process, you'll come back to the beginning and you can start again. So this is, I think I'll get to this here in a little bit. What this is making a decision for now, not forever. So you're saying, this is what we're going to do right now because this is what we have the capacity to do. We might do more or something different in the future after we learn a little bit more about ourselves and our process, and that's fine. So on making a decision, some of the questions that you want to ask yourself is, what is the smallest viable project that we can take on that's going to help us move the needle for our community? And another question to ask is if this project or program aligns with the overall mission, vision, and values of our organization. And maybe these should even be flipped, because as you're deciding on which projects you want to take on right now, you want to make sure that you're always keeping those projects within the scope of your mission or your organization's goals and values. Because sometimes, like, let's say, for example, you are the Northern Cherokee County Community Booster Club, and your purpose is to help those organizations and those individuals and families inside your community. The last thing that you should probably be taking on is a project that's happening down in Salisaw that has to do with animal well-being. While that's an incredibly useful project and it's worthwhile, it's drifted from the mission of the Northern Cherokee County Community Booster Club. So not that they would do that, but I'm just trying to give you an example of sometimes organizations as they grow, they can start to move away from what it was intentionally meant to be. And that's why putting all the ideas on the table and then making a decision about who you're going to be and what you're going to do is so important. So I'm going to go ahead and pause again for just a few minutes while you take some time to fill out these questions. And again, as if you have anything that you would like to share with the group, and I hope you do, please pop it in the chat. So I'm going to shush now and maybe get some music going if I can, and if not, then we'll just do this silently. So thank you. Okay, gonna bring us back together. I think that I'm gonna share something that Emma has shared with the group. Let's see here. Emma says that she says, I think we are here to take care of all people on this continent, and success means to show the U.S. that's what we do. And as Crosland Smith, our spiritual director, says, we stand as one with all people. So that's something that's really important. What Emma's talking about there is a value that she has and wants to bring to her organization that clearly states all people are valuable, and that is part of what she would like to see her organization do. I hope I'm kind of right on that. It would be better if we were able to talk, but like I said, we'll make this work, right? Okay, so let's go to the next pillar, which is planning. The P in impact stands for planning. So again, we've started at the process with putting all the ideas out there in a respectful manner where we all say, okay, let's just get everything on the table. And then we made a decision about what it is that we want to do, what the smallest viable product for what we can do and what we can take on to move the needle on our ideas, moving them from idea to impact. So what we do in the planning stage, pretty self-evident, is that we plan. We take pen to paper. Just like I said when I opened up this session, if it's not on paper, it doesn't exist. So what we're going to be doing here is co-creating a strategic plan with all the members of the organization. And this is, again, something that I'm here to help your organization move through, is this sort of planning and strategic process. Something I want to bring up that's really important are SMART goals when you're developing a strategic plan. And SMART goals, if you've not heard about it before, it's another one of those acronyms, just like impact, stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely, or sometimes the T stands for time bound. So what that means is as you're developing your strategic plan, you've gone from your idea, you've made a decision about what you want to do, and now you're planning on how you're going to execute it. You want to make sure that when you're planning those actionable goals, that things are very specific. So what that would mean is, rather than we want to help people, because who on this call doesn't want to help people? You've gotten more specific about it by doing things like identifying your community, identifying, some of the networks that you have available, getting specific about how you want to help people. Is it you want to help people read, for example, or is it that you want to help them with their basic physical necessities? Now, these are just examples. These aren't things that you necessarily are going to be doing with your organization and your communities, but I'm just giving you an example of how we go from helping people to how we're going to help people and which people we're going to help. You want your goals to be measurable. So you want to be able to say, okay, when we started this project or program, we knew that 100 elders in our community went without lunches every week. But through the implementation of our project, we are able to feed 100 people a week, 100 elders a week through our program. So you're able to measure it rather than just saying, we want to feed elders in our community. You're saying, we want to be able to feed 100 elders in our community every week, for example. Attainable. this is where it's just sort of your reality check. What are we able to do? That's why that question from before about making a decision about the minimum viable thing that you can do is so important, because you want to make sure that whatever it is that you're doing is attainable. And this is especially important because you don't want people to get burnt out because they're not seeing the results that they wanted. So making sure that your project is attainable is great. Now, this isn't settling. I know that because we're at a leadership conference with people who always have great ideas, that nobody wants to settle. But going for something that's attainable is hardly settling. It is setting yourself up for success. So again, this is all about just moving the needle. What is the smallest thing that we can do that's going to move the needle from taking our idea to making impact? Relevant is the R in SMART goals, which means you just want it to be relevant to your community. And I can't imagine, for a silly example, that having a NASA junior space program in Kenwood is going to be very relevant. Instead, you might want to have a community building that does fundraisers to help out the community in the area, folks in the area. That might be a slightly more relevant thing. Now, if there was this, for some reason, NASA was just a really big thing in Kenwood, maybe we could look at that differently. But again, you just want to make sure your goals are relevant and timely or time bound. You want to make sure that you have a start and an end date, and that these things are actually relevant to what you're doing. Here's an example of that. If you were going to, it's a business example, but like this probably isn't the best time in the world to be opening up a video store, for example, if you had a business, because it's not really timely. We're not in the middle of, more people are doing streaming, especially since COVID. Things like video stores are shutting down as opposed to opening up. So you just want to make sure that what you're doing is timely or time bound. So we have a start and an end date to a project. Okay. Now, another thing as you're planning is to know your strengths and understand your gaps as well. And that could be anything from, hey, we have people who are really tech savvy and we have people who are excellent social media jockeys. And so those would be some of the strengths that you would want to play to within your organization as you're planning for success. But you also want to understand your gaps. So like, what are some of the gaps that you have in your organization? Maybe nobody in your organization knows how to run Zoom. Okay, so there might be a tech gap there as opposed to being something you excel at. That's something that you can fill, or you can help bring on other people to help fill those gaps. And again, remember that this is an iterative process. Not now doesn't mean not ever. So once you've conceived the idea, made a decision, and started a plan, just remember that your plan is going to come back and it's going to be cyclical. So once you finish one idea, you can come back and start new ones. Okay. So I'm going to pause now. Oh, no, I'm not. I'm sorry. We've got questions to go over, and then we'll pause. These are the questions that I want you to answer during this little interlude. What resources do we need to make this happen? So whatever your idea is, and maybe we've gone a little too fast because this is just a 1 hour presentation about moving from idea to impact. So you might not have all the answers to this yet, but these are the kinds of questions that you need to ask yourself as you're going through this process. What kind of resources do we need to make this happen that you might not already have? That could be anything from money, it can be training, whatever it is a gap between where you are now and where you want to be. What are those resources? You want to ask yourself, who is in our network? And specifically, who is in our network that might help us with some of those resources that we need that we don't have? What are the gaps between where we are now and where we want to be after this project or program is implemented? So again, that's some of that like future thinking thing. What does success look like for us? But be very specific about it. What are those very specific gaps between where we are now and where we need to be when we're successful? Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and pause now for real this time and let you guys work on those questions. All right, now I'm going to take us back to our impact here, and Thank you, everybody, for your patience again as we deal with all the tech. Okay, so now we've gotten all of our ideas on the table, made our set our intentions, we made a decision, we're starting to plan. Now we've got our plan in place. It's time for some action. We're gonna act. That's what the A stands for. So some of the things that we want to, I'm gonna pause real quick and hop over to the chat and just see if we have any questions over there. Oh, okay. So Debbie is telling us that her organization needs more manpower, just human power, volunteer hours for research, and so we need internet. And there's just some general help that they need to set up their new community building. Those are all really good specific initiatives that you can put on your plan. So that's awesome. Debbie, we should connect more and talk about how to help your organization out. Okay, so now we're in action. We've identified what we're gonna do, we've made decisions, we started to plan, and now we're acting. This is where the accountability really sets in. I think maybe this is a little bit about what Debbie was talking about, because we wanna make sure that people are actually doing what they said that they were going to do. And it's okay, even for volunteers, to hold people accountable. And it's okay, Mariah, to have people actually do what they say that they're going to do and contribute to the community. And it's okay to hold people accountable for those things within your organization. You want to leverage the talents and resources that are inside your community. If you sometimes need training to help get you to where you need to be, it's okay to ask for that. That's part of what CCO tech team is here for. You want to reach out to your partners as you're acting to get more people involved, more man hours, more people to help you out, but also just to leverage some of the other resources, not just human power, but maybe some talents and resources that you've identified as gaps. This is all about growing the organization. And as you do this process, you go back and around, it's okay to, or what you're going to find is that this actually grows the organization, because as you do more and you're reaching out to the partners and you're getting some publicity about what it is that you're doing, more and more people are going to want to come and be a part of that if you're doing something that's compelling and relevant, which is what we talked about during our SMART goals. Oh, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the follow-through formula, which I'll just go really quickly over it, but if you wanted to talk some more about it after this session, we can. But what the follow-through formula is all about is really just saying, okay, we're going to do this one thing and we're not going to focus on anything else until this thing is done. And I know that sounds, well, you know what, I'm not going to go into it. We don't have time. We could talk about that forever. And we're already down to 17 minutes and I want to get through this. So if you're interested in knowing more about the follow-through formula, just pop it in the chat and we'll take care of it afterward. Now, here's another thing that's really important for action, and that is to give each other pep talks. I will give you a pep talk. Your best friends can give you pep talks. The thing is, this is hard work. Doing community work is not easy. You guys know this. I know this. Everybody at this conference knows that doing community organizing work is a lot of work, and it's exhausting, and you can get burned out. That's why it's important to have pep talks and to come together in forums like this, where that synergy comes out and you can really begin to experience what it's like to have success and understand that the work that you're putting in is going to pay off. If you ever need a pep talk because you're not sure that your community organization is doing what it's supposed to, or it's not doing enough, call me. I will give you the biggest pep talk in the world, because that's what you need to do when you're doing this action. And it's frustrating, I understand, but you can still do it and we can make things happen. It's wonderful. Okay, so here are the questions that you want to ask yourself when you're developing, when you're doing the actions, when you're developing a plan for who can do these different actions. Who can take on what responsibilities? This is really important, because if you're trying to do events that require a lot of moving around, for example, but your membership isn't all that mobile, it might not be the best responsibility for most of those people. So you just want to match up what actions can be taken on by which individuals. Who do we know that can help? Who do we know? Like if there's 8 of you at the table and you're trying to pull off this big project, but you know it's going to take more man hours than what you have, who do you know that you can help? That's part of the action. It's asking those people to help. You always want to kind of give yourself a check and say, are we actually embracing our values through this action? And if you're not, just take an assessment of what's going on. Has this thing that we love and we thought we were going to be really excited about, has it really just made us really frustrated and we don't like it and we're not having fun anymore when our value was to have a good time? Then you need to just assess what's going on and try to pivot and do something different next time. You always got to ask yourself, how much is this going to cost and how can we fund this? I'm a grant writer by trade, and I know that when you have money, it makes things a lot easier to do. And so we can always talk about the different kinds of grants that you might be available or you might be eligible for, both within Cherokee Nation and outside of Cherokee Nation. We've got a little bit of COVID money right now. We could talk about that. It was another session that I did earlier, but we can talk about it if you need later on. Then the last question that you want to ask yourself is, through what platforms can we tell our story? So something that's really important, and if you checked out any of Ian Adair's sessions, he's always really good about storytelling for nonprofits or fundraising storytelling. So you want, as part of your process of becoming this great organization that's doing all this cool work in your community, you need to be able to have a relevant story that you can kind of put together and tell people, like, this is our values, this is what we're doing, here are some of the successes that we've had, an elevator pitch type thing that you can tell people so they'll want to join your organization. So I'm going to go ahead and pause for a few minutes. I don't think I'm going to try to do the music because it wasn't coming through very clear. So I'm just going to give everybody a minute or two to jot down some answers for that, put anything you want answered in the Q&A, any answers that you have to this in the chat. David has a quick question. He said, what are some examples of platforms? That's a great question. Thank you so much for asking me to clarify that. When I'm talking about platforms that you can tell your story, things like social media, print news, newspaper articles in the local, your local community newspaper. Those are the kinds of things I'm talking about. Or maybe there are other networks in the community that meet monthly that you think would be helpful to connect with. Maybe you haven't connected with before. I'm thinking, like, for example, the Pocahontas Club in the Claremore area. They might be connected with other women's organizations in the Claremore area that have nothing to do with Cherokee Nation, but they have another shared touchstone, which would be, women. Pocahontas Club is mostly made up of women who do things for their community, for example. So it's a great question. I hope that was helpful to you, David. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to our next pillar, which is creating change. Ultimately, you've gone through this whole process of identifying your ideas and your intentions, making a decision, planning, and now you've started taking actions to make that plan come to life. And now you're really looking at creating change in your community. This is when you get to see the results of your action. Again, you're growing the membership because they're seeing all the great things that you're doing. At this point in the process, you're going to have to assess what's working and what's not. Again, you might have, like, in the last section, as you're going through the process, maybe you found that you're not having fun, like we just talked about, and you've said, this is a value of ours, we need to have fun, and assess what's not working and saying, why aren't we having fun? Well, maybe it's because you chose projects that you thought would be good and would check all these things, but they're just not aligned in some way. And that's fine. Again, this is an iterative process. It doesn't mean abandon everything that isn't just coming your way, because that's not what community organizing is all about. Sometimes there's going to be frustration, there's going to be obstacles to overcome, but still, there's sometimes things just aren't working, or they're not going to work, or they change completely. I mean, all of us here, I'm sure, have had some situation that says, hey, we had this thing that we were going to do and COVID just completely upended it. That's okay. It doesn't always work out the way that you would plan, but this is part of creating change, is looking back and saying what worked, what didn't, what can we do better next time. I don't want you to burn out. I know this is hard work. That's why you're going to call me anytime that you're going, I don't think I can do this. I'll give you that pep talk. And remember to have fun. Creating change is great, but there's this spot here in the middle between action and creating change that gets really sticky and frustrating. That's okay. It's part of the process. Just stick with it and try to have as much fun. For the love of God, just laugh about it. Sometimes you just have to laugh about it, because otherwise it'll drive you absolutely nuts. So here are some of the questions that you want to ask yourself when you are in this phase of the process. How did the implementation for this project go? What worked? What didn't? What can we learn from that? What was easy for us? What was really hard for us? As we move forward, what those things were that came really easy to our organization? How can we do more of those things to reach our goals, and less of the things that we found were really hard and frustrating? What can we learn? Always be asking yourself, what can we learn in this process? And then finally, what additional resources, support, training do we need? And be willing to ask for those things from those who can help you, like the folks at CCO's technical training and assistance. I'm gonna we're running out of time, and I want to get through this. I want to get to any questions and answers if we have them. So I'm going to go ahead and skip to the next slide. And this is where we're at the end of this process, and we'll come back again to it, come back to the beginning. But T is all about telling everyone you know. I want you to tell everybody you know about the successes that you've had. Again, this is all about publicity. It's about marketing your organization. It's about getting the attention that you deserve for the great things that you're doing. So it's all about getting noticed for what you do. You've put in all this hard work. You've called me up. I've given you pep talks. You've given each other pep talks this whole time with members of your organization. You did this great thing. You've created some change in your community, but God, people should know about it. That's what this process is all about, is telling people about what you're doing to gain more traction. This is going to help you get more funding in the future, grants. It's going to show that you have a track record of great stuff that you're doing, and it's going to get more people involved in what it is that you do so you can do more of it. So this is all about telling everyone you know all the great stuff you're doing. You're going to develop more compelling stories to explain what it is that you do, to show examples of what your organization does. I want you to get publicity and outlets for all of the work that you've done. Continue to leverage those relationships that you've made throughout this process. Make more of them. Tell everybody you know. Tell everyone at work. Tell your quilting group, whoever it is, tell them what you're up to. You know as well as I do, especially in Cherokee communities, word of mouth is one of the most valuable ways to get the word out. So I want you to tell everyone you know through the relationships that you have, and you're going to be growing your membership. So here are some questions that you might want to ask yourself when you're at this point in the process of community change from idea to impact. What's a compelling story that we have about our project? If you went to any of my sessions earlier, I was doing one on sister communities, and we were talking about a couple of the different projects. There was the cookbook. There was a cookbook that the Marble City Community Action Agency, and I'm going to mess up the entire name, but it was the Cherokees of the Northern Central Valley in California. They got together and they developed this cookbook, and it's an awesome project that is benefiting both organizations. That's the kind of compelling story that shows and showcases the great work that people are doing. What online outlets could we use to tell our story? What about print? Newspapers in the area, magazines, things like that. Are there any podcasts that we should be on? That would be a really cool thing. Who has done something similar, and how did we hear about it? So this is kind of the follow the leader thing. If there was some sort of inspiration for a project that you did, how did you hear about it? How could you maybe get into that same avenue of information and get your project out there? Are there any local summits that you should be attending, whether they're virtual right now or in person? Those are the kinds of things that you would think about at this part in your idea to impact process. Okay, so we have covered a lot of ground in an hour. I know that that's a lot to cover in an hour, but I want you to know that working through this process, we have a whole strategy behind it, a whole way of working through it. And if it's something that you and your organization are interested in going through, it's a pretty intensive little process, but it's great. And at the end of it, you have awesome projects and you've made the impact in your community that I know you want to make. So if that's something that you're interested in, definitely let me know. Here is my email address, my website. While I contract with CCO, so I work with them a lot. I'm not an official staff member of CCO, but I can certainly help with some of these things if this is something you're interested in. You can call me, text me. If I don't answer right away, leave me a voicemail. If I don't get any emails and I don't get any phone calls from this, I'm going to be super sad. I already think I have one email from this session, so thanks, David. But I want more. I want to help you with these things. This is why I'm here. This is the thing that makes me excited and I'm so passionate about. You're out there doing awesome work. I just want to help you do it even better. So we just have a couple minutes. I know we have about 3 minutes left here. I'm going to check the Q&A and the chat. If you have any last minute questions you want to pop in there, go ahead, and I'll see what we can accomplish here in the next just 2 or 3 minutes. So we got a heads up that it's almost time to end. Emma/David asked if there's any ideas for leveraging relationships. Leveraging relationships in my mind is all about just having genuine conversations and connections with other people. So that maybe you already have some sort of connection to. So when I'm talking about leveraging relationships, I'm talking about the people that like you already work with, or maybe it's a church group or another civic organization that you're a part of, or maybe your family members they have a relationship with someone that would be beneficial to your community. If you were trying, I can't really come up with an example on the fly right now, but that's something that we can work through more, David, or any of the other organizations as we go through this process together. Failures dictate success, meaning failures define success. Yeah, that's right. You might have had some failures, but that just shows you if you learn from them, it's not a failure. Okay. Lynette says, thanks so much for this information. We started a project. We don't have it yet. Any tips on how to grow our membership? This is a great question, and I don't have time to answer it, but Jan, Annette, please grab my email, connect with me after this. I think on the conference app, there's different ways to connect with the speakers too. Send me an email, we'll connect. I would love, love, love to talk to you more about this. And I've got your email address as well. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and say we've gotta close. I know that they're gonna kick me out here in just a minute. Thank you everybody for being here. I hope this was useful for you. I adore you all. I can't wait to see the successes that you're coming up with. Okay.